Aside from figures like Babe Ruth, many of the stories of early baseball players are often overshadowed by the league itself. This isn't surprising, since there have been more than 20,000 players since baseball's start.
Oh, Mr. Man, couldn't miss my grandma's funeral. I've got the price, I've got the price of a bleacher seat. I will stand the treat to the big league ball game.
This is a brief look at one of these players' lives and where it intersected with a growing country. His name was Carson Skeeter Bigbee. Bigby was born in 1895 in Central Oregon. He was one of 3 boys born to working parents, both of whom were teachers.
Well, when he's born in 1895, most Americans are still rural, and farming is by far the largest profession in America. We have this sort of story that after the Civil War, America industrialized, but what we forget is the farm population grew by leaps and bounds across the late 19th century, and it continued to grow until 1920, rapidly. Imagination is being lit. What they're really interested in is electricity and the electrification of things. So there's a lot of talk and a lot of imagination about what this will do. And telecommunications is a huge deal. They're putting electric cables across the oceans, things that took weeks and even months to transfer information, almost. Travels at the speed of light. This is really big. What they called it is the annihilation of time and space.
While America continued to change and modernize, Bigby attended the University of Oregon, where he thrived as a multi-sport athlete. He earned the nickname Skeeter due to his speed while running the bases, and seemed well-positioned to make a name for himself in professional sports. After college, Bigby would see quick success in the minor leagues, attracting the attention of the Pittsburgh Pirates, who signed him to a contract in 1916.
When he gets his contract with the Pirates, we're at the high point of the progressive era, and the progressive reforms are sweeping the country, and people's imagination about making a more modern, more progressive, more even democratic society is really percolating through the country. So these are exciting times to live. It's also perilous times. 1916, the war in Europe has been going on for 2 years. And that war attracts a lot of attention from Americans, mainly from the perspective as they want no part of it.
The year 1917 brought significant change for many across the nation, as war abroad finally set in as a reality for our country.
Yeah, the draft was real. The really important thing to know about the draft is that the Army thought that they would need some 5 million soldiers. Now, by the time the American soldiers land in Europe, the war is going to be over very soon. And 100,000 American soldiers died in the war, but perhaps most of them died from the pandemic.
Bigby was able to play in 1917, and in the off-season he would work in the Seattle shipyards. In October of that year, he married Grace Bingham, who he met at the University of Oregon. The following year, during the off-season, he enlisted with the Army Coast Artillery Corps at Fort Stevens, Oregon, and was honorably discharged at the end of the war. Bigby had high career marks in 1921 and 1922. Eventually, he would encounter a setback, with a decline in health and his overall performance over the following years. America would also experience a shift post-war.
Well, the mid-1920s is a very complex time to think about in American history. The key thing is that the First World War created this sort of national intolerance, American first sentiment. What came out of the war was not democracy, but race riots and the Red Scare and the jailing of radicals. And across the country, there was the rise of the Second Ku Klux Klan. And this is at a time when the culture of white Protestant Americanism was very strong. That was sort of, I think, a reality in the 1920s. It was a very conformist, tough time if you're not within that set. And a lot of the sort of the patriotic flag waving around baseball would be within that context.
Ted Williams once said, "Baseball is the only field of endeavor where a man can succeed 3 times out of 10 and be considered a good performer." By 1925, Bigby was no longer a starter and struggled with his hitting when called upon. Despite these struggles, it would be easy to imagine this season as being among the most memorable that he played. It was this year that Bigby and the Pirates reached the World Series, where they faced the Washington Senators. After overcoming a 3-1 series deficit, the Pirates found themselves down 1 run in the 8th inning of Game 7. Bigby was called up to pinch hit. He saw success, doubled to left, and drove in the tying run. A few plays later, he scored what would be one of the deciding runs of the game, and to help the Pirates win the 1925 World Series. The following year, he would no longer be in the major leagues, and after a short stint in the lower regional leagues, he would be on to the next chapter of his life. The year was 1929, and Bigby, along with the rest of the nation, would have to endure the Great Depression.
Well, it is sort of interesting that he does go into such an unsteady thing after he leaves baseball and goes into the grapefruit growing business. That sounds like a relatively high-risk thing to do. The lack of steady footing, though, with the Great Depression was across the country. There were some people with assets and resources that kept them from worrying too much. And some people even made a lot of money on other people's distress. But the great majority of Americans who weren't very wealthy or very well connected, their world was turned upside down. I think the key word for those years was insecurity. There's just tremendous lack of security for what you'd be doing and how you'd keep yourself and your family afloat.
During this time, Bigby struggled with various health issues, worked on his grapefruit ranch, and as a car salesman. During World War II, he would return to the shipyards for work.
He's going back to the shipyards because it's something he knows how to do and he can make money, but also because that is a patriotic place, which makes me think he's sort of in tune to this American optimism and these American transformations, that he's gonna do all right with this.
In the late 40s, he was persuaded to return to the game of baseball as a manager in the American Girls Professional Baseball League.
Well, Americans in this epoch were very speculative. They would gamble. You know, it wasn't unusual for people to gamble. People would gamble on a possibility of managing a women's baseball team or growing grapefruits. It's not unusual to think of someone of his background changing careers and hoping for big outcomes. That's sort of an American story that was told over and over again.